man, like nothing against people who have Mercury and Pisces in their natal chart, but as a transit, oh my god, to me it's been harder than Mercury retrograde. Mercury retrograde in Aquarius was almost, well, I wouldn't say it was a breeze, it was hard too, but man, I'm just waiting for Mercury to get out of Pisces. Anyway, at any rate, speaking of that, I'm gonna be doing this forecast or astrological overview for Sunday, March 28th through Saturday, April 3rd. And that kind of neatly fits into a 1 week portion. But that's actually not the reason why I chose that. I'm actually doing this forecast for basically going between the day of the full moon in Libra all the way to April 3rd, which is when Mercury enters Aries. So let's begin. Okay, so here you should see on your screen, and I'll pull it up on my screen. This is the chart for the full moon on Sunday the 28th. The full moon is at 8 degrees Libra. You've got Sun at 8 degrees Aries. And this full moon is particularly interesting just because Chiron and Venus are pretty much exactly conjunct the Sun. So very much in alignment with the full moon. Venus and Chiron both have their energies infused with the Sun, which is opposing the full moon. So this very much, there's a lot to unpack here. In addition to that, there's also a grand trine, which is a little bit looser of an aspect here, but with the moon at 8 degrees Libra, you've got Saturn at 11 degrees Aquarius, and then Mars and the North Node at 14 and 12 degrees respectively of Gemini. So there's an air grand trine with a 3-planet conjunction or cluster in Aries. So some people would call this a kite because it's an aspect between 4 points, I guess. Okay, so what does that mean? So in general, with any Libra full moon, it would be about like harmony and kind of a give and take nature, learning balance between yourself and others, balancing your needs with other people's needs, and that brings up relationships, whether they be romantic or otherwise. There's always some kind of give and take with relationships, and that's generally what the full moon in Libra is about. Not only because Libra has to do with those things, but also because with the full moon, you're always kind of balancing two different sides, balancing the sun with the moon. Since they're opposing, you have to have a balance between those two things. And so, Libra kind of has a lot of traits or themes which are similar in nature, I guess. So this full moon out of all of them definitely has to do with balancing multiple things. So first of all, Libra is an air sign, so it's very social, but that social airiness is just highlighted and brought out even more by the air grand trine. And you're mixing, Mars and Saturn, which are more masculine. Some people will argue about whether Saturn's male or female, but I would say overall Mars and Saturn together are more of the masculine kind of vibe. They're more kind of harsh and cold, but they're in our places of sociability. Gemini and Aquarius have to do with interacting with acquaintances, friends, members of our community. So there's a lot to balance here. Balancing connections. Luckily, there are trines between the moon and Mars and Saturn, which kind of softens those aspects a little bit. So maybe we are being a little bit more ambitious with our social connections, or putting ourselves out there more, whether it be just for fun or for socializing. We're maybe trying to attract the right people and the right experiences to ourselves with other people. But doing so in a almost like ambitious way with Mars and Saturn there. So having intention, having desires, and maybe long-term desires with the Saturn influence, but all in relation to that give and take with other people, if that makes sense. So this is the time for maybe long-term strategy. How can you create a sustainable situation with yourself and others, whether that be in terms of health or happiness or even profitability. And that's a kind of a nice segue to Venus, because of all the planets, I think Venus is the most highlighted with this full moon for two reasons. One is because Venus is conjunct the sun. That's very literal. It's very direct. Venus is directly involved. But also Libra is ruled by Venus. So the moon is in a sign which is ruled by Venus. And so this full moon is Venusian by nature. So it does have to do with how we display affection or, express our affections, I guess, or, how we care for others. But in this full moon, Venus is in Aries, so ultimately it's about self-love, expression of our own truth, I think. Like, to me, what it comes down to is basically like, you can't be there for other people if you're not there for yourself. If you're not exploring your own truth and expressing your own truth, and you're trying to be there for other people or cooperate with other people, it's not going to work in the long run, and you might not even end up helping other people, because it's got to be true for you first. In astrology, we start out with Aries. Aries explores themes involving the self. You got to have that before you have anything else, otherwise it's just not going to work. Libra comes much later. It's halfway through the cycle. That's where we start exploring more complex themes involving other people's needs in relation to our own. Oh, kind of sweaty. It's so warm today. Yeah, you gotta have that self-care first, and so I don't think it's necessarily bad to be selfish to some extent. You gotta look out for yourself, and with Chiron conjunct the sun as well, I think we have to be our own mentor at this time, our own representative. That's not really that too, but Chiron involves themes which are, being a healer or being a mentor, being a guide. And so with Chiron and Aries, and with that conjunct the sun, with this full moon, at this time we have to care for ourselves, nurture ourselves with all the Venus stuff, but also be our own mentor, be our own guide. I think especially as we mature, we kind of get to know ourselves better enough to know what's good or bad for us. And basically, it's about self-care, basically. Self-love, self-care, self-expression, doing all that in order to better, cooperate with others. Because, it again, like the full moon is in Libra, which is about other people, but the ruler of that and, this triple conjunction are all in Aries. So you can't have one without the other. You can't properly take care of other people without taking care of yourself. And you can't really, I guess you could flip it the other way and say you can't really take care of yourself without, being there for other people as well. You can't just completely put yourself in a box away from everyone and away from the world. And that's what this comes down to. There has to be a balance there. So take time to just have self-care, I guess. And that's different than self-indulgence. Make sure that if you are indulging in things, that they're actually what's good for you and what's best for you. And that they're helping you, that what you're doing is helping you achieve whatever it is you want to achieve. That's kind of the name of the game with this full moon. And so that's how we start out the week, sort of, on Sunday. And to me, this looks like, other than all those things that I just said, which are a little bit heavy, the self-love, those things might not be so intuitive to us just because our society doesn't focus on it, I think. We're not always aware of how we sort of talk to ourselves, or how we relate to ourselves, I guess. Or you might be kind of neglecting yourself, or have sort of negative thoughts toward yourself, something like that. A lot of people struggle with that, so this is definitely a time to focus on that and to have that positivity and that self-care, I guess. But other than that, that's kind of all the themes that are brought up by this. But other than that, this to me looks like a pretty nice vibe, generally speaking. It doesn't look like the best time to be super productive or like to be working super hard, but it looks really nice for social interactions with just all those air trines, and then plus the Aries influence. It just seems like, whenever you're highlighting the Libra Aries axis, to me that shows a really good socializing energy. So Sunday would almost be a nice time to have kind of like a party, maybe a low-key party. Nothing too crazy, because Mercury is in detriment and fall, so you want to watch out for those miscommunications or those like technical issues. So I don't think it'd be a good time for having like really elaborate plans, or traveling super far or something like that. But it looks like a nice time to just have like a low-key get-together or something like that, because the Libra Aries axis is very sociable. Both Libra and Aries are ruled by Venus and Mars, which have to do with our desires, especially socially. So it's a good time for, I don't know, if you can make some time for some pleasant experiences, pleasant social interactions. To me, it looks like a nice time for that, especially compared to the last couple months, because I don't think Pisces was the best time for that, like last month, because it was highlighting the Virgo axis, and that could be very confusing or mentally or emotionally destabilizing. And before that, we had the pile up in Aquarius. So to me, this is kind of the first chart that looks really good for like going on a mini vacation or just having a little get together or something like that. Looks really great for socializing and just having a good time. Yeah, and so that seems nice to me. Going forward, that was the main thing. So like, I wouldn't be surprised if half the video was just talking about that, just because there's so much to unpack with that date. That's kind of the highlight of the week, to be honest. However, there's a lot of other stuff happening. So Monday the 29th, I think some of those technical aspects happen early on Monday with like the sun conjoining Uranus and Chiron, maybe very early on Monday, like 1 or 2 in the morning, of course, depending on where you are. But still even later in the day. This is for like 3 p.m. on at least Eastern Standard Time. And you've still got Chiron, the Sun, and Venus. They're all separating, but they're all still pretty much conjunct. They're within 1 or 2 degrees away from each other, with the Sun at 9 degrees Aries in the middle. So the themes that were brought up on Sunday will continue into Monday. So that self-care, that self-talk, it's all about the self, all that stuff turns into something over the next couple days, because Venus is beginning to sextile Saturn, and so with the full moon, we can have things that are sort of long lasting that begin on full or new moons, but especially with Venus beginning to sextile Saturn, which will go direct on the next day. I mean, which will be an exact aspect on the next day. I do think that it would be a good time to take advantage of that and to change something about how you treat yourself, or make time for yourself, or something like that could lead to a really long-lasting change. If you begin it on Sunday the 28th, but then, follow it, and it might develop into something really big over the next couple days on the 29th and 30th. Other than that, I did mention Mercury is in Pisces, and specifically on the 29th, on Monday, Mercury will conjoin Neptune. So Mercury is going really fast right now. So if I just go forward a few hours, Mercury will go from 20 degrees Pisces to 21 degrees Pisces, thereby conjoining Neptune. So yeah, this is almost like it's almost kind of similar to Mercury retrograde in a way. Like, and I know that's kind of wrong for me to say. I mean, it is and it isn't. It's just similar in the sense of there could be like delays or technical issues, miscommunication, stuff like that, because Mercury is not functioning in its normal way right now. Mercury is how we think, our thinking patterns. It's also like short distance travel and kind of the rhythm of the day. Like if you're doing errands or planning a lot of things throughout your day, that's all Mercury stuff. What else? Communications, thoughts, stuff like that, our mental processes. So I mean, in Pisces, Pisces is such a different energy than all that. Pisces isn't a very technical sign at all. It's all about emotions and dreams, and it's so kind of vague and ambiguous in relation to Mercury, which is very specific and technical. That Mercury is it's very debilitated there, I guess. And this just gets highlighted all the more so on the 29th when Mercury conjoins Neptune, because Neptune is, of course, the ruler of Pisces. So it just kind of doubles that Piscean influence over Mercury. So, that's why I say it still looks like a good time for socializing, just because you've still got that, the moon is still in Libra on the 29th, so that we've still got the Aries Libra axis highlighted, and there's, kind of a lot of air planets, I guess. So still a good time for socializing and stuff like that, but that's why I say it's not a good time for productivity necessarily, just because Mercury is in such a weird, kind of messed up place. It would be a good time for healthy escapism, I guess, with that Neptune and Pisces influence. Mercury conjunct Neptune in Pisces would be really great for like creative writing or something artistic, something creative, or I don't know, it rules dreams and stuff like that. So if you have dreams, you could have maybe a meaningful dream at this time, something like that. It could be good for, being intuitive or being like tuning into other realms of consciousness, stuff like that. What it's not good for is like being productive and like working, doing stuff where you're in your, your mental brain. That doesn't even make sense. But like, do you know what I mean though? Like that state of consciousness where you're thinking very quickly and everything's very technical and, very physically oriented. it's not good for that. It's not good for planning a lot of things or doing a lot of errands. That would be a nightmare with Mercury conjunct Neptune in Pisces. So that's why I say socializing still seems pretty good. Just maybe try to go out of your way to avoid miscommunications and just make sure everything's clear with Mercury so debilitated. But other than that, yeah, it just doesn't look like a super productive time. It looks like if you have the opportunity or the privilege to kind of kick back, and it still looks like the best thing to do if you can would be to have just like a chill small get together with some people you already know pretty well. Like that seems like a pretty nice thing, because chance of miscommunications or technical issues are pretty low, especially if you're doing something just low key. But then you've still got those air and Aries energies, to have some good social interactions. So that seems like the best thing, in my opinion, was just like a low key get together. Not super good for being productive on Monday. So we might feel kind of hungover or sluggish on Monday, even if we're well rested, just with that Mercury on Neptune, or maybe just kind of confused, or we could have like mental, like mood swings, or weird, just being kind of a funk in our head, I guess. Stuff like that on Monday. So it's kind of unfortunate that it's on a Monday too. So, but yeah, so mental fogginess on Monday. Going forward, Tuesday the 30th. Only aspect I have is Venus is at 11 degrees, so it's sextiling Saturn. So I did touch on this. And I do really think that that's connected to the full moon that only happened 2 days prior. So yeah, pretty much just what I said. I see it as something involving self-care or nurturing yourself, focusing on yourself more, prioritizing your own needs, all that good stuff, turning into something potentially really long-lasting by Tuesday the 30th. But the sextile is kind of like a tricky aspect. It's something that you might not, it's not very consistent. It's kind of like a fleeting aspect. So depending on if you have planets that are touched or triggered by this, you may or may not experience this very strongly. It's not the strongest aspect by any means, but especially if you have planets at 11 degrees of especially 11 degrees Aries or Aquarius, then something really beneficial and long lasting could come up from something to do with your self-care, self-talk, looking after your own needs, something like that. That's the main thing I see. The moon's going through Scorpio, so bringing up some kind of heavier themes, I guess, to some extent. Moon is in detriment in Scorpio, and we can be a little maybe moody at that time or suspicious. And specifically on this day, so on the 30th, there's actually a yod here. So if you're not familiar with the yod, it's this triangle here. So it's two quincunxes and a sextile. It's not exact in this example, but there is basically an exact quincunx at this time. Well, and it depends on the time too, because the moon's so quick. But just happening at this time, at 8 or 9 p.m., the moon quincunx is Venus at 11 degrees Scorpio with Venus at 11 degrees Aries. But then also Mars is at 15 degrees Gemini. So pretty close, especially if I go forward a couple hours. With the moon going through 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 degrees Scorpio in the evening and into the night of the 30th, even into early morning on the 31st, there is a yod. So moon is quincunxing Venus, and then on the other side quincunxing Mars, as Mars and Venus are still sort of sharing a sextile with one another. So what that means is yod is also called the finger of God because it looks kind of like a finger. Some people say it's God giving you the finger because it creates this this bittersweet situation, which is problematic, but there's nothing really that you can do about it. It just creates a really weird situation. So especially if you have any planets around, I would say between like 10 and 16 degrees of Aries, Gemini, or especially Scorpio. You might just experience some kind of issue, probably just on the 30th or early on the 31st, because the moon is so quick. You'd only experience this on the day of that aspect. But yeah, like I said, just some kind of issue that can't be solved, and there's something bittersweet about it. I mean, Venus and Mars are sextiling somewhat. Again, it's not exact, but so that does provide a harmonious side to this, but then the two quincunxes are just so problematic and awkward, and it's just, you can't combine Venus and Aries with Moon and Scorpio with Mars and Gemini. They're all just such different energies. It just doesn't, like, how you can't compromise between those energies, and so it manifests as just some kind of problem that just can't really be solved, that you kind of just have to live with usually. Or if there was a solution, it would be from some obscure weird way, or maybe it would be from some place that you can't really control, like or you could have like catch-22 situations, or just kind of like mindfuck situations. Like the yacht is kind of a mindfuck aspect, so let's just put it there. But again, the moon is very quick. It will only affect you on the 30th and 31st. And then going into the 31st, let's just go forward a few hours. The sun does also sextile this Saturn. So again, I still think that's kind of bringing up themes from the full moon on the 28th, just because the sun and Venus were both involved in that aspect in the full moon, and now they're both making passes to that sextile aspect with Saturn. So again, I see it as something coming up from the 28th or 29th involving self-care, self-love, self-expression. Maybe you're focusing on cooperating with others, but from the context or perspective of putting yourself first to some degree. But something involving that, and that could manifest very differently in your life depending on your own chart and everything. But something involving that turning into something potentially very long lasting on the 31st. I know I repeated that. It might be a little bit redundant, but it's just coming up again on the 31st with the sun passing that sextile, just like Venus did the day before. So that's something to look out for, and could be something very beneficial. Also, this is really nice too, because the sun's exalted in Aries and Saturn's in domicile in Aquarius, and they're making this nice sextile, so they're almost like having a sort of like a friendly chat, or just a nice connection with one another, and they're both in very strong places. So I think maybe that could just kind of cement those positive benefits from the full moon, if there were any for you. Hopefully there were. But yeah, maybe really solidifying your ego with Saturn making that sextile aspect with the sun. Saturn solidifying things and making them structured and long lasting, and then sun representing our ego. That's kind of how I see it. So it looks like a really nice aspect, a nice side of Saturn. And take advantage of that by, I think it would still be on focusing on self-care and self-love and all that good stuff. Okay, and let's go forward to April now. So April 1st, there's no exact aspects. The moon does enter Sagittarius, and so it is approaching the south node. I don't think you would experience that super literally. If you have planets in Sagittarius, you might feel a little bit, when you have the moon in your own sign, you feel more lit up or more activated, I guess. But with the south node being there, that could bring up parts of yourself that aren't as productive, or things that you do need to make changes with, I guess. I guess that's all I'll really say about that. But it is nice because I think there's overall kind of a yang influence. You do have, Uranus and Pluto are in Earth signs, Neptune's in Pisces, which is water, but Mercury is nearing the last few degrees of Pisces, so it's preparing to enter Aries. But then you've got several planets in Aries, Gemini, Sagittarius, especially when it comes to personal planets with Sun, Venus, Mars, and Moon all in fire or air signs. So overall, it's a more expressive time and very active, kind of experiencing some of those spring vibes. Still, there's a lot of like social energy, I think, with those air signs being brought up, aspected, I guess. Okay, let's go forward again. So April 2nd, Mercury is sextiling Pluto now. And again, Mercury's so quick that I didn't even catch it here, but because it is traveling through multiple degrees per day now, for sure. On April 2nd, Mercury will sextile Pluto. Again, kind of a minor aspect. Sextiles are kind of hit or miss. But with Mercury making that aspect with Pluto, we could be kind of obsessive a little bit. We could be kind of like um, hyper focused on figuring things out, because putting Mercury and Pluto together kind of is like detective energy, figuring out mysteries and stuff like that. Especially with Mercury in Pisces and Pluto in Saturn, or Pluto in Capricorn. Um, I could see that as like maybe somehow using intuition with Mercury in Pisces to try to figure out some kind of things about society or government or the bureaucracy. It almost looks kind of conspiratorial to me, with Pisces being the more um, spiritual or intuitive side of things, and then Capricorn being the societal side of things, and then putting Mercury and Pluto there. Seems like, being kind of obsessively trying to figure out like conspiracy theories or something like that. And it might not literally manifest as that for you, but that's the general like vibe of it, if that makes sense. Um, so maybe just figuring out like things about the hierarchical system in your own workplace or something like that. But I think just be careful with that, because again, Mercury is in detriment still and in fall, so we might be kind of making connections where there aren't connections, or making connections that aren't really grounded or aren't productive, focusing on things that maybe aren't super beneficial to focus on. Maybe it is a sextile, so that is a harmonious aspect, but I think Mercury's not in a super good place. So on the other hand, though, with Mercury in detriment, you could be focusing on things that are out of the ordinary. So maybe you are seeing a side of things that is very real and very productive, but it's just not something you would conventionally look at, or it's like some kind of like taboo information, or information that most of the people in your world disagree with, but that, like unpopular opinions, I guess, would be a way of saying that. All those things could kind of be highlighted on April 2nd, if that makes sense at all. And again, it's just a sextile, so especially if you have planets toward the end, the last several degrees of Pisces or Capricorn, you would probably feel this more literally. But depending on your chart, it's one of those things that is a little bit vague, and you might not feel really distinctly. Okay, and then going to April 3rd, if I'm not mistaken, I think Mercury enters Aries on this day. Yeah, okay, wow. So that's just crazy to me. I mean, so April 3rd, it kind of depends on what time zone you are, because it's such a late ingression. Here again at Eastern Standard Time, it's like past 11 p.m., so almost April 4th. But it's just crazy to me that, at least in this time zone, Mercury will go from 27 degrees Pisces to 0 degrees Aries in one day. So that's just crazy to me. Like 3 or 4 degrees in one day. That's how fast it's going. But yeah, so gosh, I don't even know what to say about that. I guess just the last degrees of any sign are like kind of like a crisis point, because it's an ending, and endings are hard for us humans. Change is hard, because that's really all an ending is just change. But yeah, the last degree of a sign kind of might bring up like flashbacks and stuff like that. Lessons that we've learned the during the transit of that sign. It's like the test at the end of the class, where it brings up all the stuff you learned throughout that time period, if that makes sense, in one kind of big test. And for some signs, it's more intense than others. I would say it's the most intense for Pisces, because this is the conclusion of not only Pisces, but also the entire cycle, the entire chart. So Mercury has completed like one chart of one cycle of the zodiac in that context, I guess, if that makes sense. So kind of a major ending, and which can be destructive, because something is ending, something is dying to some extent. One incarnation of Mercury is sort of ending to make way for another. So that can be, it sounds kind of nice and fluffy on like a theoretical level, like, okay, let's do away with the old and make way for the new and stuff like that. That sounds super great, but it of course can be very difficult. Could be very mentally destabilizing with the Mercury, since it's Mercury doing that. But after going, basically I'd say this, like starting out April 4th, I think we would feel much better, just because Mercury is so different in Aries. It's highly functional. It's not in domicile and it's not in exaltation, but Mercury does. It's in joy in the first house. The first house does have some kind of correlation to Aries. I do think Mercury. You could almost say Mercury's in joy in Aries, just because Aries. Mercury's almost like I don't want to say exalted, but it's almost like it's on steroids or something in Aries, just because Mercury loves that quick pace, that fastness, and accomplishing projects and stuff like that. So with Aries, all that stuff is beginning. It's very exciting for that Mercury energy. So what that translates to is after April 3rd, starting off the day in April 4th, Mercury will be in Aries. So we're much more communicative. It's almost like you wake up from that Mercury in Pisces transit and go, wow, what even happened? You're just more awake, more conscious. You can communicate much more effectively, I would say. Mercury in Aries is more blunt, and I think it's very clear. It's very confident. It's drastically different than Mercury in Pisces, so definitely a big change just overnight, the night of April 3rd. And yeah, that pretty much concludes this video. So I'm hoping to probably not post anything until till that day, because like I said, I will be probably hopefully a lot different once Mercury enters Aries, just because I experienced these transits so literally. Yeah, so let me know what you guys think. I noticed I have a couple new subscribers. If you have any input at all, I'm all ears, just because I have a lot of information, but I don't know what people are interested in. So if there's anything that interests you, if you want to hear my take on any of your like personal placements or anything like that, if you want a natal reading, I'm all ears. I'm open to suggestions. Also, if you have any ideas about like the formatting, I put myself in this video just because I'm experimenting with different formats and styles. But yeah, just let me know anything, or just how these transits are going for you. I'd love to hear about it and talk with you in the comments. But at any rate, that's my take on this week of March 28th through April 3rd. And yeah, thanks for watching. I'll see you next week.